Types of agency relationships. What is agency again?
Employee-employer relationship. Yeah.
Did you what? You what?
Employee-employer relationship.
You said the same word twice.
Employee-employer
Well,
relationship.
okay. So employer-employee relationship. It's easier. Somebody followed you. Michelle said employee-employer. Okay. There has to be an employer hiring the employee.
Does the order really matter?
It does.
It,
What came first, the chicken or the egg?
I personally think that.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But the test will not ask you employer-employee relationship. I'm asking you to remember it that way because that means somebody hired you to be their agent. Nowhere on the test it asks, oh, what is this, employer-employee relationship? No. It's just an easier way. Some of the stuff that I point out is easier ways to remember. Okay, you have to be hired for an agency to exist. If you're not hired, then you're a non-agent, therefore no client, no principal, just a customer. Got it? Cool beans. All right. So agency relationship is employer-employee relationship. Now, according to the level of authority delegated to the agents, there are three types of agency. There's universal, general, and special agency. Now, universal agent. What I want you to write here, universal agency, you have full powers when representing somebody else, because agency has to do with representation, right? So you have full powers. In a universal agency, the principal empowers the agent to perform any and all actions that can be legally delegated. Okay, universal agency means you can perform any and all actions that can be delegated. And this instrument of authorization is the power of attorney. It could be through a living trust. You could be like, there's many ways to establish it. The most common would be power of attorney, where you give you full powers. Now, as real estate agents, do you think we can have full powers and representations representing somebody else? No. So universal agency does not exist for us.
For the broker.
No, no, of course not. So what do you mean it's for the broker? Do you think if you're in a coma, knock on wood, but if you're in a coma, I'm the broker, I'm gonna like, so Masha, you accept this contract, right? Yes. I'm gonna sign for you. Do you accept that contract? I have those powers. No, it has to be somebody that's closer to you, right? That you appointed, you gave all those powers. I'll give you an example. Without doing power of attorneys, without doing anything, we are universal agents of our children. Or I mentioned pets. If you have a pet, you're the universal agent because you make decisions on their behalf. You have full powers, right? That's a natural universal agency. A legal universal agency is when you would put in a piece of paper that says, you know what, in the event that I fall into a coma, in the event that I come into a disability, I'm become mentally impaired or whatever, I'm giving this person full powers to do anything in my best interest on my behalf. Does that make sense? So I'll be universal agency. As agents, we don't have that power, okay? And I don't want it either. Don't give me that power because I will put you in a coma and sell everything you got. You know what I'm saying? All right, the next one is general agency. I want you to write some powers. General agency, some powers. See, in the general agency, the principal delegates to the agent ongoing tasks and duties within a particular business or enterprise. Ongoing tasks and duties. Such a delegation includes the authority to enter into contracts. Now, as an example for real estate, now you can apply this one. What do you guys think in real estate? Where do we find some type of power that lets us do ongoing tasks for a person or on behalf of a person? What do you think would be? Well, in the contract, yes, everything will be in the contract. The question is, who do you think you are, or what position do you play when you're doing ongoing tasks for somebody else? Yeah. You're an agent, yes, because you're hired. That's any of these agencies, you're an agent. Say it louder. Property management. Absolutely. A property manager does not have full powers over the property, but they run ongoing tasks like maintenance of the property, hiring and firing employees, right? Renting might be one of the tasks. So a property manager is a good example of somebody with general powers. Okay. Good. All right, and that brings us to special or limited agency. If this one is full powers, this one is some powers, and then you get to something that says special or limited, what do you think it is? One power. You're really limited to one action. It's a specific activity. In real estate, what do you guys think it is? A specific, you're hired for one specific activity. What type of agent are you?
Referral. agent.
A referral agent?
You're only hired to refer.
First of all, as a referral agent, you're not hired. You're just referring. But you're getting closer to something. Katie, listing. Okay, you're hired to list. So that means you represent who? The seller. Great. Connie, find real estate. So that means you represent who? The buyer. For that specific purpose. Most real estate agents represent either the seller or the buyer or both for that one transaction, one specific purpose. When you're done with it, relationship ends. So if you hire me, Fernando, to help you sell your property, once I accomplish what you hired me for, our business relationship towards that particular transaction is over. You can have 10 properties and I can help you sell 10 properties, but each one of them has its own special or limited agency. So in most instances, real estate brokerage is based on a special agency. The principal hires a licensed broker to produce a ready, willing, and able buyer or seller. When the objective is achieved, the relationship terminates, although certain fiduciary duties survive the relationship. As I mentioned before the break, the National Association of Realtors, for instance, requires you to continue with a confidentiality duty. So even though the relationship ended for that transaction, I cannot disclose anything that was related to the transaction unless you specifically allow me to. Okay? So real estate brokerages usually are special or limited agencies. Okay? Usually are special or limited agencies. We hired for one specific purpose. We accomplish that purpose, relationship ends. Can we have multiple transactions with the same person? Yes, but they're multiple agencies. Samaya, be right back. I just gave you a 13-minute break. 13 minutes, for not 10, 13. Terrible, 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 guys. All right. Milton says dual agency. Well, has nothing. Notice that in agency, we didn't talk about single or dual. We talked about universal, general, and special. We didn't define if you represent one side, if you represent the other side, if you represent both yet. We're just talking about types of agency, not who you represent. Okay? Types of agency. Yes.
Even in the dual agency, your goal is still just the one transaction.
Even in a dual agency, the goal is that one transaction. Absolutely. Okay. All right. Agency disclosure. We already talked about this, that the agents or real estate professionals must disclose who they represent. Knowing the agent's service scope helps the consumer make an informed decision when making or when seeking representation, right? You guys remember I talked about CIS, Consumer Information Statement? Like that's what we use in New Jersey. Other states have different forms. but it's a document where you tell the client, potential client or potential customer, how you could represent them and what they can expect of you. So every state agent requires agency disclosure and specify when, how, and to whom to disclose. Every state has their own rules. They may require specific written disclosure format that discloses all agency alternatives, including a brokerage firm's service policies. And customers and clients are often given brochures or forms that outline agency options. So again, in Jersey, it's called CIS, Consumer Information Statement. Now, regardless of state requirements, if whether your state says yes or no, because we're in the national portion still, whether your state says yes or no to having to disclose or when to disclose, when do you think would be wise to disclose? Right at the beginning. So real estate agents should explain agency alternatives to buyers and sellers before any confidential information about a person's motivation or financial situation is disclosed. So before you tell me if you got money, or before you tell me if you need to sell and for whatever reason, I should say, hey, this is how I could represent you. So depending on how I represent you, any information you give me might be given to the other side. Okay? So it's very, very important that we do this before any confidential information is given. You call me up and say, hey, Bruno, I want to buy a 4-family in Newark. Great. Let me search the MLS and give you properties right now. Right? Is that what I should do? No. What should I do?
Your intention.
That's it. I should say, hey, I got no problem in searching properties for you. I just want to give you a heads up that I could represent you in different ways. So if you happen to find one of the listings we have in the office, we represent the seller, and that could affect your position as a buyer, right? So now I need to disclose what a seller's agent is, what a buyer's agent is, what a disclosed dual agent is, and what a transaction broker is before we proceed. So this is why we get off the phone real quick, because this disclosure, it's 2 pages, by the way. So listen, if you call me up, right, I'm going to try to get you to an appointment. Simple. I'm not going to call it an appointment, but hey, there's a few disclosures I need to present to you. When would be best for us to meet? And I can show you a few properties then. Also, because sending you over an email really doesn't explain what you're going to look at. So I'd like to explain what you can expect from the listings that I send you. Does that make sense? Something not invasive. It's not like, oh, you need to sign the contract. No, that's not what I'm saying. I just need to sit down with you, go over the options of representation and how to read the stuff I'm going to send you. Simple.
This is more like, it's a business question.
Mhm.
During those interactions, would you invite the client / customer, potential client customer, like to coffee, or would you tell them to come to the office, or like how would you do?
Whatever you prefer.
Okay.
So Masha's asking if once you're licensed, right, and this type of interaction happens, would you invite them to the office? Would you go for a coffee? Like, it's whatever you feel comfortable with. If, like, for instance, you're a female, if your client is a male and you're meeting them for the first time, I don't think a coffee would be
Yeah.
the best option. My personal opinion, because you don't know what you're getting yourself into. Right? So I would invite them to the office. Some people go like, oh, let me go to your house and we can do a presentation there. If you do that, if you go to an office, I'm sorry, somebody's house, or you go for a coffee, bring somebody with you. Protection.
Yeah.
Because you never know. Right? And this is by the way, once you get licensed, there's a lot of trainings on this, on safety issues, whether you're a man or a woman. Okay, safety issues, very, very important. If you're going to an area that you don't feel comfortable, bring somebody with you. Always let somebody know where you're going. All right, it's very, very important. So in that scenario, I'll leave it up to you whether you want to go for coffee or not. I always try to get somebody to a non-threatening environment, so a coffee, but I do bring somebody with me if I have to, depending on the situation.
Like
And
another
also-
agent, or
I'm
like
sorry?
a friend?
No, agents, obviously.
Okay.
You want to bring an agent. In our scenario, we work a lot with team leaders. So definitely when you're starting, you bring a team leader with you so it can help you explain all the details. Like, hey, I just started, but by the way, Bruno here is my team leader as an example. He'll explain the whole process to you, right? Something like that. But mainly in this scenario is for safety reasons. And also, the other thing is the potential sexual harassment. Now, I know it falls under safety reasons, so but listen what I'm trying to say here. Let's say your client's a male, right? Because you're the one that brought it up, right? The client's a male and he's married or has a girlfriend or whatever. You're setting up for a coffee. The other person on the other side is going to be like, why is she setting up a coffee? Right? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you definitely want to bring somebody else with you to prevent something like that. Unless that's your intention. That's a different story. To each his own. So it always comes back to you. Like, what do you feel like?
Okay.
All right. Single agency. What does this mean? You represent one party only, either the seller or the buyer, the landlord or the tenant. Simple. If it's a seller agency, in the traditional situation, a seller or landlord is the agent's client and the buyer or tenant is the customer. Now, recently, buyers are seeking representation as well. Like, there's not many that say, hey, I want to have exclusive representation. Not many. In fact, I don't even force on it because I don't want to represent anybody. I like being transaction broker where I focus on the transaction, not on like, oops, I can't say this. Oops, I can't say that. Right? So, but some buyers are like, no. If you're representing somebody, it's going to be me. That's it. So that's a buyer's agency. So it's become more and more common for an agent to represent a buyer or tenant. And in this relationship, the roles flipped. The buyer or tenant is the client and the seller or property owner is the customer if we don't represent them, only in a single agency. Now, real estate language calls for an agent of the seller or owner, a listing broker. If you represent the seller, you are the listing broker, not just the seller's broker, you're a listing broker. An agent who works for the listing broker and who obtained the listing is the listing agent. A broker who represents a buyer is the buyer's broker. One who does this as a specialization is a buyer broker or selling broker. Now, why is a buyer called a selling broker if the seller is the listing broker? Why is the buyer called a selling broker? What do you guys think? Why not just a buyer's broker? Why selling broker? Because a seller is the listing broker. Why aren't they called the selling broker? Opinions? Give me your best shot without reading, because there's nothing else to read there for that. You can look at it. There's nothing to read. The name says it all, listing and selling. Listing. What does it mean to list something?
And make it viable.
To
Like,
what?
to put it on the market.
Put it on the market. So to advertise it, right? That's all you are. If you're a seller's broker, you're just an advertiser. Somebody needs to close the deal. Who's going to close the deal? Who's going to sell the property?
Selling them.
Whoever brings a buyer, the selling broker. Exactly. Does that make sense? So a listing broker is the one that markets the property. That's a seller's broker. It's a listing broker. And the buyer broker is the one that brings a buyer and accomplishes the sale. He's the selling broker. Okay, so take notes, write that down somewhere. Listing broker advertises the property. Selling broker brings the buyer and accomplishes the sale. It's like Walmart. You put stuff on Walmart on display, right? Let's say this is a Samsung. You're going to go to Walmart. You put the phone there. Walmart is just advertising, right? That's it. It's just there, right? And then they have reps on the floor, right? They'll go like, oh, would you like to buy a phone? And here we go. Now they're accomplishing the sale. But Walmart, the brand, is just advertising, listing. Okay. Milton, the buyer's broker is called selling broker because they accomplish the sale. They're the ones that bring the buyer. Okay. So the seller's broker is called listing broker. The buyer's broker is called selling broker because they accomplish the sale. A property is on the market, it's available, but it doesn't sell until there is a buyer. Whoever brings the buyer is called selling broker. Made the sale happen. Good. There's a lot of things, especially when we get to financing, there's a lot of things that you are used to one way, and I'm going to teach you the actual way. So one of them was mortgage. You guys remember who's the mortgagor and who's the mortgagee? I like the way she said it. The mortgagee is the bank. It's pretty much how she did it here. You guys don't see it, but that's pretty much how it went down. Yes, the mortgagee is the bank, and the mortgagor is who?
Person asking for the mortgage.
But not.
Receiving.
See,
Oh.
who receives the mortgage? The bank does,
The bank.
because you're the one giving the property. Mortgage represents the house. What does the bank give you in exchange?
Money.
Money or a loan. Yes, you give the mortgage to the bank in exchange for money. And you're going to learn later that that's called hypothecation. Yep. All right. A broker can also market, lease, maintain, or manage an owner's property. And this is an ongoing relationship. It's called property management. An agreement makes the broker the owner's agent and holds the broker to fiduciary or statutory duties to the client owner. Now, an owner may hire a broker only to find tenants. If it's only to find tenants, they're called a leasing agent, right? They're not a property manager. So the broker's sole job is to find tenants for the owner's property.
That would be a leasing agent?
Yeah, we call it, I didn't write it down. It's not going to be asked in the exam. I'm just saying the difference between a property manager and a leasing agent. Property manager has ongoing activities where a leasing agent just leases and that's it. All right, dual agency. Dual agency, you represent both, right? But dual agency is illegal. Yeah. Say louder.
But, well, it's illegal if it's undisclosed.
Correct. So on its face, it's called illegal until you disclose. So dual agency, most states now allow dual agency, but until recently, it was not allowed. So the agent represents both the buyer and the seller, or the tenant and landlord. Dual agency may arise from voluntary specific agreement between the principal parties or from the parties' actions, much like implied single agency. Now, conflict of interest. Dual agency contains an inherent conflict of interest. Since many of the agent's fiduciary duties can only be rendered to one party, dual agency is by definition difficult, if not impossible, right? Because you cannot give your best to both parties. There's limitations on it. Written informed consent. In states that permit dual agency, the agent must meet strict disclosure requirements, and principals must agree in writing to proceed with the dual agency relationship. Disclosed and voluntary dual agency. The parties to a transaction may create dual agency by giving written consent in disclosure forms, confirmation forms, and sale contract forms. For example, an agent represents a buyer who becomes interested in a property that the agent has listed with the seller. The agent then discloses the principal relationship, the relationship with the principals to both principals, so to both sides, and the principals agree in writing to move ahead. A disclosed dual agency is thus a voluntarily created. Ooh, hold on. Getting all tongue twisted here with this. All right, next one we got is implied, undisclosed, and illegal dual agency. Implied and undisclosed illegal dual agency. If a broker or agent acts in any way that leads a customer to believe that the agent is representing the customer, a dual agency has potentially been created. For example, a buyer, and this is repetition. We already went over this before the break. We give you a few examples, right? A buyer makes confidential disclosures to the agent who works for the seller and exhorts the agent to keep them confidential. Now, the buyer wants the house, but knows he's going to lose his job in a month and probably will not qualify for financing. What should you do in this scenario? You know the buyer is about to lose his job. If the buyer loses the job, doesn't qualify for financing. Without reading, guys, don't keep on reading. Just stop right there. Tell me your opinion, because at the end of the day, none of the questions at the end of the chapter are going to be on the exam. The comprehension of the questions is going to be on the exam. So they're going to post scenarios. I want to know what's your gut feeling. You represent the seller, right? And you find out that the buyer is about to lose his job, therefore won't qualify for financing. This might actually be a question in the exam, thus being here. What do you think you should do as an agent?
You should disclose to the buyer that you represent the seller and that this information, like you're gonna relay it back to the seller because you're looking out for the seller's best interest.
Okay.
Unless you choose to represent both ends, then they will have to agree and have to write that something.
All right, so let's say this. Let's say you do represent both. So I like your answer, because obviously if you don't represent the buyer, you should automatically run to the seller and say, hey, they're about to lose. They're about to lose their job, right? But let's say you represent both. What do you think about this type of information that could affect the transaction? Should we still disclose to the seller even though we represent the buyer as well, and it's kind of like confidential?
You should disclose.
Why?
Because it could make the sale. It affects the transaction.
Absolutely, the sale could fall through. And if there's no other time to think about your commission, by omitting this, yes, you're going to lose your commission. All right. So you should always, if there's something, we're going to talk about this several times throughout this book, anything and everything that could affect the proposed transaction must be disclosed. Write this down somewhere. Anything and everything that could affect the proposed transaction must be disclosed. A buyer losing their job definitely affects the transaction. There's no guarantees they'll get a job in the next 30 days. And even if they do, a lender might not accept their new job, or we might have to wait another 2 months. Does that make sense? So, yes, cancel the deal, absolutely. And by the way, guys, this is a true story. My cousin was selling a condo, well, his wife, before they got married. They were just dating, selling a condo in Totowa, right? I was not the agent, right? But I asked, hey, how's it going? You know, family members will never list with you, just saying, or buy with you. So get used to it. Don't get offended by it. Get used to it. Move on. And it's good that they don't, because then they cannot point fingers if something goes wrong in the future. So sometimes strangers are your best friends. But anyway, here's the thing. It was listed. I was not the listing agent, like I said, but the listing agent knew a week before closing, he already knew that the buyer had lost his job 3 weeks before. Why did we wait 3 weeks to let the seller know that the buyer's out of a job trying to find another one? Guess what happens with that transaction? Of course it fell through. Especially because the condo was also in an area that you need to have good down payment. FHA doesn't qualify for that particular condo. So, absolutely, if they wanted to.
Did they?
No, because the other party was also a family member.
Stupid.
Anyway. Anyway, so the point is, if you know about something like this that could affect the transaction, it's your job to relay whether you represent or not both parties. Because it's a waste of time for everybody. Even for you, what are you hoping for? You'll find a job in 30 seconds and hopefully it'll be seamless, like nobody would notice that they got a new job,
Yeah.
brand new paychecks, brand new everything. Right? You guys need to remember, the lenders usually, right before the closing, they verify all the information again. Okay? What would be a good reason not to disclose that? Like I said, they were hoping that the buyer would find a job out of the blue and all of a sudden be like, hey, I can still buy. Yeah. But very good. Like, why would you hold that information back? Like, but what's the point? Anyway, so the buyer wants the house but knows he's going to lose a job, right? If the agent agrees to keep this information confidential, the agent's not only created an agency relationship with the buyer, but is now in a dual agency situation. Moreover, if the agent fails to disclose the buyer's confidence to the seller, the agent has violated fiduciary duty to the seller. Okay. Now, duties of a disclosal agent. A dual agent first duty is to disclose the agency relationship to both principal parties or to withdraw from one side of the dwelling. After disclosing, the agent must obtain the written consent of both parties. So before you can even proceed, like I said earlier, before the break, before you even proceed, you have to say, hey, Mr. Seller, I found a buyer for you. I'm actually representing them. Are you okay with that? If the seller says yes, we move forward, put it in writing. If the seller says no, can you represent? No. Okay. And vice versa. You got to tell the buyer as well. If both parties accept the dual agency, the agent owes all the fiduciary duties to both parties except full disclosure, undivided loyalty, and exclusive representation of one principal's interest. You're not going to be like, hey, Mr. Seller, the buyer is willing to put more money. Hey, buyer, the seller is willing to accept less money. Obviously, you can't do that. Everything else is still in effect, but that's one of the things that affects your dual agency. Now, a designated agency, also called assigned or appointed agency, is available in some states for in-house sales involving two sales associates of the same broker. And yes, before anybody asks, because I had this question actually months before this person was after this person was already licensed, sends me a message, says, Bruno, if two agents in the same office put a transaction together, one represents the seller, the other one represents the buyer, do we need to disclose dual agency? Yes, because who represents? The broker does. So it's one broker, therefore dual agency. Okay. The fact that there's two sub-agents, that's a different story. But it's the one agency that represents both seller and the buyer.
You get more commission that way, right?
What do you mean?
If, let's say, for example, if
The commission is set in stone. It's negotiated before we start.
No, you know, the breakdown goes to the listing brokerage and the seller brokerage. So if both of those brokerages are the same, then wouldn't you, as the agent for that brokerage, get a bigger split?
Whatever your split agreement is. So if you're at 70-30, you still get 70% because you get a bigger check because you represent both sides. But it's not a bigger split, it's the same, 70%.
Okay, that's a bigger split. You get more money.
You could definitely get more money. But here's another warning. There's a lot of agents that do this. They do not show houses until they have the buyer. Meaning, let's say I'm the agent and you call me up because you have, let's say Lydia wants to buy a house, right? You bring her to me and I say, oh, sorry, no showings. No showings. And then Elvira calls me and says, unrepresented. It goes like, Bruno, I see you have a house listed. I would like to see the house. And I show it to her. Why would I do that? Why would I stop you, an agent, but I would show the house to somebody unrepresented? so I could be their agent and control the full commission. That obviously is illegal as well. Okay. All right. Plus, no agent will want to work with you once they see the pattern. Not only could you be sued because you're not representing the clients properly, but no agent's going to want to work with you. You're going to be labeled as that. All right, non-agency or transaction broker. We already covered this. What is a non-agent? A non-agent is a customer. You don't represent. Thank you, Elizabeth. You don't represent anyone. What do? We represent the transaction. We're facilitators only. Okay, we facilitate, we're transaction coordinators, we're contract brokers, but not an agent of either party. Not an agent of either party. Very important. Non-agent's job is to help buyer and seller with ministerial acts, such as paperwork and formalities. All I'm doing as a non-agent, as a transaction broker, all I'm doing is opening doors. It's not my job. All right, so Stephen will be perfect for this one. It's not my job to be the mold police, right? You figure out on your own, Mr. Buyer. That's it. It's not my job to look for, oh, it smells like fresh paint, you should investigate this. No. All I'm telling you is very simple. As a transaction broker, Mr. or Mrs. potential buyer, I'll open doors for you. I'll help you prepare the paperwork. I'll give you advice, but don't expect me to go above and beyond. Advice about how the transaction goes. First, we put an offer, gets accepted. There's inspections. You're on your own. I'll give you everybody, but you're on your own.
What would anyone choose?
Almost everybody's okay with it nowadays. You know why? First of all, because nobody explains this, and it's a requirement. Nobody explains the CIS. They just say, hey, you got to sign here.
And it's illegal.
Of course it is. Stephen's question is, where's the transaction broker's commission? Wherever it was agreed. If you represent the buyer as a transaction broker, the seller agreed to pay commission to whoever brings a buyer, didn't say how, right? Didn't say how you represent, it's just whoever brings a buyer. But let me show you real quick. I know Jennifer, I think, showed the MLS to you guys, right? Watch me put the wrong password. Yeah. Yeah, that would be a reason. Seriously. This is what happens when you rely on stuff already saved on your computer, you know? Uh-huh. Right? Invalid. Oh. There you go. Actually, it was not paying attention. It's 976, not 974. All right, so let's do a search of any property out there. Essex, I'm in Newark. So let's say the very first one coming soon. All right, so all the way here at the bottom. All the way at the bottom, it says. You guys see here, buyer's broker, BB, buyer's broker. 225. Sub agency 0. Transaction broker 225. So the listing agreement, to answer everybody's question, the listing agreement will say, what are we willing to offer? And it has these 3 options. Buyer's broker, whoever represents the buyer. Sub agency, I'm not talking about it. It's not tested in the exam, so we're gonna skip it for now. It's not even, some states don't even have it anymore. It's illegal. And transaction broker. So it clearly stipulates how much commission you're gonna get. In this transaction, I don't know how much the listing agent got in commission. They could have gotten 10%. All I know is out of that 10%, whatever it is, 10, 7, maybe they got 3.5% out of it, whatever. They're paying me, if I bring a buyer, they pay me 2.25. That's as much as I know. All right. So if I represent the buyer as a buyer's agent, I know how much I'm getting. If I do not represent, but I'm helping somebody as a transaction broker, I know what I'm getting. Simple as that. Good. So we are getting paid. It's based on the agreement of whoever agreed to pay, the seller in most cases.
And that's still negotiable.
At this point, it's pretty much set in stone, but can you negotiate? Sure. Especially if you want a transaction to go through, you might take half out of yours and half out of theirs, just to make the deal go through. Anyway, the non-agent must treat all parties honestly and competently, find qualified buyers and suitable properties, help the parties reach. This is what we do. Paperwork and formalities. I just don't represent you, Stephen. So I do the same thing that a buyer's agent does, minus the representation. So I don't go above and beyond. What do you need me for? You don't know how to fill out contracts. You don't know what steps to take. You don't have access to open the door. You don't have access to the MLS or details of the property. I mean, several reasons why you might need me. Several reasons why you might not need me at all. Okay. No, a buyer's agent will go above and beyond. A buyer's agent will keep your information fully confidential. A buyer's agent will look for details of the house that could be construed as latent defects if not disclosed. Again, it's a matter of a buyer's agent can get you into the house as well. Anybody that's licensed can get you into the house. The question is how they're representing you. Is it full representation or some representation, meaning they're helping you fill out paperwork? Think about it this way. Why do we need attorneys? We don't. If you're trying to fill out forms, you can go to a regular agency out there, a multi-service agency that helps you prepare paperwork. You don't need the attorney. The difference between somebody that prepares paperwork and an attorney is the representation. That's it. Can I fill out, like I used to own a multi-service company. I had an attorney as a partner, but to fill out legal documents as far as for instance, let's say immigration paperwork, right? If you want to apply for a green card or green card renewal, or even apply for citizenship, I would prepare all the paperwork for you. I would prepare everything for you, right? Or somebody in my staff will prepare everything for you. But if you want representation while there, now it's an attorney. Does that make sense? I could not represent you in immigration, but I can do exactly the same thing as the attorney as far as filling out paperwork and following the procedures. I just could not represent you. Okay. So, Zoraida, yes, you need to be licensed because you're getting compensated from it. Anytime there's a compensation involved, you need to be licensed. No, your buyer's agent can do all that, obviously, yes. Why would you want to have somebody who doesn't represent me? It's a personal choice, just like everything else. Why would you want somebody to fill out your paperwork to renew your green card or to put a petition? Like you just want somebody to put a petition, I don't know, some application you do to the state. Why do we pay people to form LLCs? You can do it yourself. But why would you do that? It's a personal preference. Maybe I don't have the time to learn this. Hey, you're an agent, your license, help me out. So again, it's you wouldn't, Stephen. There's a lot of people that would. It's a personal preference.
But if you're gonna get paid, pay the representative.
One is personal preference. Two is understanding the difference. Three, agents don't explain. But again, it's personal preference. And to you, the buyer, it doesn't cost you anything. Most of the times, 99.999% of the times, the seller is the one paying for the service. So it's whatever. For most buyers, it's whatever. It exists as well. Most states have that. Either it's called transaction broker or again, facilitated mediator or anything like that, but it exists. Yep. Do you need to hire an attorney for selling? You don't need to hire attorneys for anything. You don't need to hire agents for anything. You can do everything yourself. You can do for sale by owner, representation by owner. You can do whatever you want. You can even extract your own tooth. You don't need dentists. The question is the amount of damage you're going to get by extracting your own tooth. Does that make sense? That's what it is. The amount of damage you're going to get and liability. If you hire a dentist to extract a tooth, the dentist has a license and a bond, and they're liable for their actions. If you don't hire the dentist, it's kind of like at your own risk. Okay. So non-agents are equally responsible to all parties and must disclose known property defects. However, they may not negotiate on either party's behalf or disclose confidential information. Buyer and seller negotiate without relying on real estate agents. When you hire attorneys, you pay them. Yep. Attorneys, one of those fees. We'll talk about that when we get to closings. But attorneys are one of those fees that's strictly yours. So there's some stuff that's what we call prorated or adjusted between the parties. Like it comes out of one party to pay the other. But attorney fees, if you choose to hire one, again, same thing, choose to, then you pay. All right, termination of agency. How do we terminate agency? What is the agency again? Representation, right? So how do you terminate the agency? Hopefully, boom, full performance of all the obligations. That means
Close the sale.
we close the sale, everybody's happy, and we made money. Good? Okay. But termination of agency could also be by mutual agreement, meaning all the parties agree to cancel. It's mutual. Or if you're the listing agent and the listing expired and you did not renew, what happens? Agency is over. That's it. Relationship is over. Okay. It's one way for you guys to get listings is to get notifications of the MLS of all the expired listings. A lot of agents do that when they start. They put an alert on the MLS for all expiring listings. Because as soon as it expires and I knock on your door, you're no longer represented. If I have a buyer, boom, dual agency. Anyway. Like a shark. Yep. I mean, but there's a legal way and the illegal way. If you show the house while it's expiring, or if you have the client's interest while it's expiring, then the commission still belongs to the previous agent. If you got the listing and you have a potential buyer, but you got the listing the day after it expired, then it's yours. It's a fair game.
How long is usually the standard expiration?
Standard.
Like,
Usually it's 6-month listing. Nowadays it's been 6. It used to be a year. But if you cannot sell a house in 6 months, then something is wrong. And I can tell you what's wrong is you. either you did not tell the seller the proper value of the property, or you did not adjust to the current market. You know, like a lot of agents right now are still living the dream of high values. But in some markets, properties already dropped 5% in value. Others almost 10% in value already. And agents are still, no, we'll put it up high. Anyway, Elvis, do you get a commission for buying a home for yourself? Why would you get a commission on your own property? But you do. Actually, you do. So since you represent yourself, you get that part of the commission, and you can apply it towards your closing costs. Yep. So if you're the listing agent and you decide to buy the property and the seller's okay with it, if you're the listing agent, you decide to buy the property and the seller's okay with it, then you get the full commission. So no down payment. If it's a 3.5% down or something like that. Anyway, but you're representing yourself. Everything is game. And depending on the agency that you're with, or depending on the broker you're with, you might be a different rate. So some brokers, of course you pay the broker. Some brokers will say, hey, you know what? Just give me $500 fee just because you did it through the company and there's other fees involved. Some will say 10%, or let's say your average split is 70-30, that's your agreement. Oh, if it's personal properties, it's 90-10. Or if it's personal property, it's 100% minus a set fee, whatever. So everything is negotiable. Some brokers will say, your split is 70-30, so you always owe 30 to the brokerage. So negotiable. All right. Another way to terminate, the contract is involuntarily. You could lose it. How? Death or incapacity of either party, abandonment by the agent, condemnation or destruction of the property, renunciation, breach, bankruptcy, or revocation of your license. If your license expires, revocation, suspension, or expires license, you can no longer practice any real estate activities. So the moment it expired, you're done. Any contracts that were pending, if you did not renew your license, that contract is done. Do you get paid? No. Who's happy? Your broker. Because they get full commission. Because you decided not to renew your license.
Did that happen a lot?
Yeah. Everybody wants to be a realtor. When it comes to pay the dues, they're like, Look, I have a bunch of MLSs and I have a lot more responsibility than the average realtor does, right? As a business partner and, leader of the company. So I have a lot of money that I have to pay every year. But even then, if I do one referral of a rental, not a sale, a rental still pays my my fees.
When you get the license,
Okay, Nash. Huh?
you get the license, how long?
It depends. So my fees are a little bit less than 1,500 a year. 1,500 a year. It's not bad. My fees, because again, I have different MLSs.
How long?
Your license in Jersey is 2 years. But regardless, per year, I have an average of 1,500, but that's me. You're going to have less than $1,000. The National Association of Realtors, is like $500 every year. Then depending on how many MLSs you have, depending on errors and omissions, however it is structured in your agency, right? Let's say $800, more or less, a year. But again, you do one rental. One rental. You got to pay fees to one rental to pay your fees. Everything else is profit. Considering, right? Yes. That was your question? Shoot. Anyway. Moving forward.
Oh, to renew your license, you don't have to take any additional courses, it's just a monetary thing.
you might be required to take continuous education. Most states now have continuous education, right?
Does Jersey have?
Yeah, of course. As of 2011, Jersey has CE credits as well, 12 hours. All right, that's tax deductible. It's the cost of doing business. So anything almost everything that's a cost of do business is tax deductible, yes. Absolutely. All right. Involuntary termination of the relationship may create legal and financial liability for a party who defaults or cancels. For example, a client may renounce an agreement, but then be liable for the agent's expenses or commission. All right. Even though an agency relationship has terminated, the fiduciary responsibilities of the agent, such as the duty of confidentiality might continue, and we already talked about it. All right, dealing with customers. Who are the customers? What is it? Third parties, which are
People you're helping but not representing.
people you're helping but not representing. Okay. While the agent's primary obligations to the principal, the agent also has legal obligations to other parties. A real estate professional's duty when dealing with a third party or customer is to act ethically and by all applicable laws and regulations. This includes both federal and state consumer protection statutes. The real estate professional is also obliged to act with reasonable care and skill and be honest and fair with the customer and reveal any known or expected to be known information that could impact the property's market value or desirability. So even though I don't represent you, I still must disclose some type of information. Okay. Now, opinions versus facts. There's something called professional opinion, right? There's something called personal opinion, and then there's facts, right? Fact is something that's not an opinion. It is what it is. Like this color is blue, right? You can say in your opinion that it's not blue, that it's navy blue, but it doesn't take the fact that it's blue. It could be royal blue, but it doesn't take the fact that it's blue. Does that make sense? Right? You can call it whatever. You can even say this is pink
In your personal.
in your personal opinion, but the fact is it's blue. So we have to be very, very careful when giving opinions. Okay. Like saying, hey, the market is doing great. It's going to go up. Buy now because in the year from now, you're going to have $50,000 in appreciation.
In my professional.
Oh, the moment you said professional opinion, you're liable. If you're representing that party, and you said, in my professional opinion, market is going to go up, you're going to make 50K. Like some people say it out there, like, where else do you get a 50K bonus on your job? You don't. So come on, just invest in real estate. You'll make 50K by next year. And then market crashes. As a buyer, what can I do? Of course, because you gave me your professional opinion. Just like a legal opinion, just like a medical opinion. You got it? So you have to be very, very careful when you're giving opinions,
If
right?
I say it's my personal opinion, they can't do anything.
Are you representing or are you involved in the transaction? Okay, so don't say personal opinion either. It's an opinion. What I would say is, given the facts of what's been happening, right? It is likely to keep on increasing, or is likely to stabilize, or is likely to decline, given the facts and studies. All right. Now, you should seek counseling, legal counseling, tax counseling. Does that make sense? Right. So a lot of times when people ask me stuff, if I'm in the transaction, I will give my opinion, but I would say, look, I'm not a CPA, so I would run this by the CPA before you actually make a decision. I'm not an attorney, so I'll run this by your attorney before you make that decision. Does that make sense? All right.
You're absolving yourself of liability.
Of course. All right. And we are going to talk about that too. It's a way to avoid liability. Okay. So whatever actions the buyer or seller takes, it's on them. But if you are the one that led them to it somehow, you could be liable as well. All right. So brokers and salespeople must watch what they say. They must ensure consumers know whether a statement is a fact or an opinion. Statements of fact must be accurate, and the opinions are permissible as long as they are made carefully and without intention to deceive. Puffing, not what you think. Puffing. Why are you smiling, Alexis? What are you thinking? Puffing. Drugs. We're talking about real estate. What do you mean drugs?
Something else, never mind. You were going somewhere else.
These people. Swear to God.
Don't let him lie. He literally did it on purpose, Alexis. Come on.
All right. Puffing pretty much means overstating or exaggerating. Puffing is overstating or exaggerating something. Alexa, tell everybody at home what puffing means. Gotta mess with it. Are you guys unplugging your Alexa before the class starts? Or no, not yet. You didn't learn your lesson? Like Bruno's gonna do it again.
Give an example.
I will. It's coming. So, again, it's overstating or exaggerating profits, benefits, or qualities. According to National Association of Realtors, puffing is unethical, even if it is legal. You can do it. You can exaggerate, but unethical is or illegal. Now we have intentional misrepresentation. That's called fraud. Okay, intentional is fraud, right? An agent may intentionally or unintentionally defraud a buyer by misrepresenting or concealing facts. While it is acceptable to promote the features of a property to a buyer, or the virtues to a buyer to a seller, it's a fine line that divides promotion from misrepresentation. Silent misrepresentation, which is intentionally failing to reveal a material fact, is just as fraudulent as a false statement. So not saying something is fraud as well. Next one we have is withholding information. Negligent or careless misrepresentation. An agent can be held liable for failure to disclose facts that the agent was not aware of, if it can be demonstrated that the agent should have known. Again, coming back to the should have known such facts. For example, if it is a common standard that agents inspect the property, then an agent could be held liable for failing to disclose a leaky roof that was not inspected. Okay, in some states, that responsibility, by the way, in some states, the responsibility of contracts also comes upon us, not to attorneys, right? In Texas, for instance, in Arizona, you got to have it's 100 and something hours a course. Here is 75, right? In those states, you go through almost 2 books of contracts. Yeah, because you draw your own contracts. It's crazy. Anyway, misrepresentation of expertise. This is the one I was telling you. Always point the finger, point to somebody else. Don't do it yourself, okay? So an agent should not act or speak outside the agent's areas of expertise. A customer may rely on anything an agent says, and the agent will be held accountable. For example, an agent that represents the property will appreciate. I was giving you that example. The buyer interprets this as expert investment advice and buys the property. If the property does not appreciate, the buyer may hold the agent liable. You are responsible for it because you're the one that told me it was going to go up. If a contract to purchase real estate is obtained as a result of misstatements made out by the broker or his or her salespersons, the contract may be disaffirmed or renounced by the purchaser. In such a case, the broker would lose the commission, obviously, and if either party suffers a loss because of the broker's misrepresentation, the broker can be held liable for damages. Here's a good thing. We have something called errors and omissions. It's an insurance. It's very similar to medical malpractice. And as the name says, error, mistakes, and omissions are things we don't reveal. Okay? Subject to limitations of a particular policy, it defends against many circumstances, but does not cover fraud. Does not cover fraud. So if you did something intentionally that can be construed as fraud, Your errors in the mission insurance is not going to save you. How can they prove intent?
Like, how do they know that it's not really just an error?
Oh, you're going to have to be proven otherwise. Investigations and all that stuff. Anyway. Oh no, there's still more. All right. Guys, pay attention. I'm going to play a quick video.
I didn't have to search for it. They made it what?
You guys can hear it?
Easy. Let me tell you the next big mistake most of us make.
You guys can hear
Raise
it?
your hand, and this is what keeps us from ever getting recharged. Ever. Raise your hand if you have a problem in your life right now. Raise your hand. If you don't raise your hand, you lie about other things also. We all do. I call it our monkey. And that monkey sits on your what? Back. And guess what people try to do with their monkey? They give it to us. And guess what we do? We take their monkey. It's not your monkey. Your job when you leave this class is to start practicing monkey maintenance. That's your job. I am a master at it. Because here's what will happen. People ask you this, so tell me, if I buy this short sale, do you think that I'll get at least 20 or 30% equity? That's a great question. Let's do this. Let's ask the appraiser that question, and then they can let you know about the equity and how much equity you have in the property. Everybody raise your right hand. Go like this. Turn to the person next to you and say, it's not my monkey. Let me tell you how serious I am about the monkey. If this is all you get out of this class, it would change your life. Your life. At least 2 or 3 times a day, I'll say to myself, it's not my monkey. That is not my monkey. I taught a class in Alaska. When I checked into the hotel, they gave me a sheet of paper and they said, Mr. Watson, you need to read this. So I started reading it. And you know what it said? It tells you what to do if you're approached by a charging bear. I looked at it, I said, why are you giving me this? They said, well, the way our property's set up is you're going to have to go down a trail to get to your cabin. And on that trail, a couple weeks ago, someone was mauled by a bear. And this tells you what to do if you're approached by a bear. And you know what it said to do? It said if a bear charges you, make yourself look as big, as imposing as possible. To a bear. A bear. And it said if the bear keeps charging, that doesn't work. Cover up all your vital organs is what you should do. Bow up and play dead. That is the best thing to do. And it said in big letters on the paper, if while playing dead, the bear starts to maul you, do not scream. I said, sir, step into my common sense corner here. I'm being mauled by a bear, and you're telling me to not scream? He said, what happens if you scream, now it becomes territorial, and the bear is probably going to have to finish you off. I looked at him, I said, this is not my monkey. This is not my monkey. This is a security issue. You need to have snipers on the trees with rifles, period. That's what needs to happen. I said, and let me tell you what's going to happen. One of your representatives is going to take me to my room. They are going in first. Once I get the all clear, then I am going in. As far as I'm concerned, this mauling is totally avoidable. Totally avoidable.
Okay. So when somebody asks you, will the property appraise? Is the property in good condition? Can I get a better rate on the mortgage? Are there title issues? We're not the professionals in those fields. So that's why we have to refer. So take our monkey, that monkey, right, and give it to the right person. Because if you take that upon yourself to answer those questions, you could be held liable. It becomes your monkey. That's exactly. So Terry Watson actually, my dad just had the pleasure of meeting him at the convention down in Florida. I've been playing this video for probably like 5 years, every single class. And that's what it does. It's a speaker, it goes for real estate events and other events, but mainly for real estate. And it just makes sense. Will the property appraise, or what's the value of the property? Like, let's ask the appraiser. Is the property insurable? Let's ask the insurance company. Right? I'm not saying that I don't know, but I'm saying that I'm not the best person to answer that question. It's not my area of expertise. Exactly. So all I'm trying to say here is very simple. We already said this on day one. Cover your assets. It's as simple as that. Right? Protect yourself at all costs. This is a fight, and you have to win. Okay? We can give them people to contact. Absolutely. This is exactly what I'm trying to say. Okay? Somebody asks you about oil tank. I don't know. We need to bring the inspector to do a tank sweep. I don't know. It looks like it might be an oil tank. It looks like it, but right. It looks like it might be mold, but you see what I'm saying? It looks like the property is, let's bring a structural engineer, and then at that point, it has nothing to do with you. There's this house in Irvington that was being sold. I went to see the property. I'm like, how? You see the house, by the way, you get on the second floor, there's a pitch, like it's like a 10-degree pitch, I'm telling you. Huge pitch. You're walking and like, oh, you can even get dizzy, right? You get to the basement, you're in the basement. You could see the outside because there's a crack on both sides. Half of the house was sinking, and so much that he opened a crack in the basement foundation. There's people lining up to see the property and wanting to buy the property. I'm like, of course I advise my client not to. Of course I did, right? And I said, at your own risk. But what I would recommend is bring somebody to estimate how much it will cost to fix this gap and line up the property. So raise the property so it gets back to where it needs to be, right? So he brought two people. I gave a recommendation of one, he found another one. And both of them said, this is not a 20K issue. If it was a 20K, the property would be worth it. This is 50 to 60K issue if nothing else fails. Because after you try to bring it up, you could crack something else on top. Right? But all I said to my client, and look, I'm not the pro, all I said to my client is, I don't think this is a 20K like they're saying. I personally wouldn't buy. I don't think this property is worth it. If you're going to buy it, you better tear it down and break it brand new. Oh, not for that kind of price. I'm like, well, you know what I'm saying? That was my professional opinion. And he consulted with two contractors. One of them brought a structural engineer, and that's what it was. They said, no, it's 50s and up. It's not worth it. All right. So anyway, somebody bought that property. I don't know how the bank, I mean, I'm pretty sure I know how, but anyway. So it passed inspection. It passed the appraisal, it appraised, right? Everything went through. Oh yeah. Property was being sold for 230. I wouldn't give more than $100,000 for it. As an investor, if it was me buying, no more than 100,000.
Do you know how much was sold?
230.
Oh.
Yeah.
What was the asking price? 230?
The asking price was 240 something.
Oh.
Anyway. All right. Yeah, I'm calling. Maybe it's a contractor that bought it for themselves, whatever. Alex says, so they have 6 years to sue. Yeah, if there's any issues that were not presented, this property was sold as is, obviously. I mean, there's no way not to be as is when you see huge cracks and you can see from inside out.
Well, they can't sue if it's disclosed, like the
Mm.
guy.
Well, yeah, if there was disclosure, yeah.
Um,
Hello. You're leaving? You're doing the princess wave? The queen wave, princess wave. Yeah. All right. So many states have enacted laws requiring disclosure of known adverse property conditions to prospective buyers. Let me just kick somebody out. All right. Anyway. I turned off their camera for a very long time already. So before I start playing the video, just so you get an idea. Anyway. Environmental hazards. Disclosure of environmental health hazards that make properties unusable may be required. Federal law requires lead paint disclosure, for example, and buyers or mortgage lenders often request inspections or tests to determine the risk. Real estate professionals should consult state and local environmental authorities about toxic waste dumping, underground storage tanks, contaminated soil and water, nearby chemical or nuclear facilities, and health hazards like radon, asbestos, and lead paint. Property conditions. The seller must disclose any structural or safety defects in transaction involving up to 4 units, and latent, take that, put an asterisk there. Latent defects are hidden defects, stuff we cannot see, right? Not discovered by normal inspection. Buyers can cancel or sue when the seller fails to disclose latent defects. Courts have sided with buyers when sellers hid zoning or building code violations. Now, in some states, guys, make sure your cameras are on. I got a hot trigger right now, ready to kick people out. Anyway, in some states, the agent has certain independent duties to conduct a competent and diligent inspection of the property. And real estate professionals must discover any material facts that may affect the property value or desirability, whether the seller knows about them or not. So your job is to ask as many questions as possible. Any material facts found by a real estate professional must be disclosed to the buyers. And as previously mentioned, the real estate agent can be liable for any damages that arise from a latent defect that could have or should have been known by the agent. Okay, if it's something that you professionally know or should investigate according to state laws, right, then you could be held liable for not doing so. It is respectively easy for an agent to avoid intentional representation simply by sticking to the truth, but omissions and half-truths may misrepresent as readily as actual misstatements, and the offense may be committed inadvertently, and the buyer, looking at a rural property as an example, may be told that the septic system works well, when in fact it does not. If the agent knows the true situation, then intentional misrepresentation has occurred. If the agent does not know the condition of the system, the potential buyer is still being misled by negligent misrepresentation. Why? Because you did not ask for it. The half-truth that might mislead is a statement like, septic systems are normal in this area, and there's probably nothing to worry about. True in itself avoids the issue in a manner that may be misleading to an uninformed buyer. No mention at all of septic systems may also be misleading, particularly to an urban buyer who may assume that sewers are available everywhere. Okay? That the broker knew nothing about the condition of the system will be little defense if the brokers in that community should know about such matters. Even if the intention is not to defraud, the buyer who purchases the property and discovers a septic system to be faulty has suffered damages and may seek to recover them from the broker. So again, do we have to be professional plumbers and stuff like that? No. But if this is an area that does not have sewer systems, but have septic systems, then you should know about it and you should advise your client, hey, it's not a septic system, it's not a sewer system, it's a septic system. So definitely should inspect to see if it's working before buying, right? The worst thing that can happen is you buy a property and the septic is not working. Very expensive, yep. I had an investor that almost bought a property, South Jersey, and that area particularly has a lot of septic systems. Only few portions of that town where it was actually have sewer systems. It was all the way down in Gloucester County or somewhere. And I told him, dude, if that's not working, it's gonna be very expensive. You have to completely take it off. The way I see from the pictures, you're gonna have to remove it, replace it. It's gonna be very expensive. Oh yeah, of course you can. You can even put, if the damages are no more than X amount of dollars, I'll buy it. Anything above, either I'll walk away or the seller reduces the price. It's called negotiating. Yeah. All right. Stigmatized property. So we talked about that as well already. Stigmatized properties are those deemed undesirable due to past events or proximity to a nuisance. A homicide, drug manufacturing, gang activity, and suicide are common stigmas. Real estate professionals should know relevant state laws to avoid liability for inadequately researching and disclosing property condition facts. Some states have laws regarding disclosing information about such properties to protect sellers, real estate professionals, and local property values against baseless psychological impairments and conditions. In other states, the real estate professional's responsibility may be difficult to define because the issue is not a physical defect, but a property's perceived desirability, as I mentioned earlier, right? Many states give real estate professionals statutory guidance by identifying stigmas that aren't material facts and don't require disclosure. So when we get to the state portion of this course, we'll go more specific of what New Jersey expects of you. Okay? Megan's Law. Have you ever heard Megan's Law? You never heard of it? No? Haven't? Amber.
Amber.
That's Amber.
Never mind.
All right. Megan's Law promotes state registration system to maintain residential information on sex offenders. Megan's Law is regarding sex offenders. Okay. So after release from prison, offenders must register their names with state authorities and indicate where they live and inform authorities every time they move. If you're a registered offender, your life will never be the same. Every time you go somewhere, if you don't notify the authorities and you get caught, right back to jail. It's like a permanent probation. Okay, you know how probation is like if they catch you in the act again? No, this is if you don't notify that you've moved, back to jail. Now, the FBI provides online access to every state's offender registry. And this information can also be found in state and county websites. Now, this is what we're going to end with. And again, when we get to the state portion, we'll go more in detail. But Megan's Law affects a realtor's disclosure duty. See, while licensees may not provide information, we cannot say, hey, next door is a sex offender. We cannot provide that information about registered sex offenders. We are, though, required to inform buyers or tenants in writing where information can be found. So We cannot point or research actually who's a sex offender in that street or in that community. We cannot do that. What we can and must is through disclosures, like on sales contracts and leases, right? We can inform, include a Megan law statement that says buyers and lessees, you can find a list of all registered sex offenders living in the area at whatever website. Okay, so state of New Jersey has their own. I already gave you the FBI website here as well, right? But every state has a requirement to include that in the contract. We cannot research, write this down somewhere. You cannot research this information. You cannot provide this information. You can point them in the right direction if they are concerned about it. So if you have a concerned buyer that says, hey, Bruno, are there any sex offenders in the area? Well, here's where you can go find. New Jersey State Police website, for instance. You can go find there, or your county website, for instance, is there. It'll tell you exactly where they are, what offense they've committed, right? And that's it. But can I say, oh, next door on 125 Adams Street, you have John Adams over there on the second floor? He's a sex offender. We cannot do that. What did we learn today? Disclosure, 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 right?
Yeah.
Disclosure is key in this business. Always disclose. Just be careful if it's something that will affect your agency relationship. Okay? There's roughly 20% of the exam is based on relationship. Okay? Another roughly 10% relates this chapter with contracts, which is what we're going to do next. The next chapters is types of representations, contracts, leases. That's what we're going to learn this week. Okay? Roughly 30% of the exam is based on today and the following chapters. 30% out of 110 questions are focused on these next chapters. So please make sure you're paying attention, you're taking notes, asking questions, and go back to it as often as you can. All right?